Welcome to Vita Ministry. I'm Cassandra Barbato, your host. Let's take just a few minutes to be nourished on God's Word.
Paul has written much more than having been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him. And then it also says, for if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his son, much more, having been reconciled, much more that you've been reconciled to God, we shall be saved by his life. So if it's much more, if it's abundance more, it means that God has more than enough saving for you. He's got more than enough saving, too much saving for you now that you've been reconciled for him. If he was willing to die for you before you were now reconciled, before you were his child, how much more is he willing to save you now? Much more abundant. Okay, so let's look at the word saved. I talk about this all the time, but I'm going to read from a couple of these different concordances and studies here so that we can see what this word means. It says in the Helps Word Study, it says properly to deliver out of danger and into safety. Do you need to be delivered out of danger and go into a safe place? He has too much deliverance for you. He's got more deliverance than you could ever need. Used principally of God's rescuing believers from the penalty and power of sin. Have you done things that you shouldn't have done and they're bringing consequences on your life? Stop telling yourself that you're okay living under those consequences. Reject them by the blood of Christ, not because you don't deserve them, but because Christ paid the penalty for them. Rescuing believers from the penalty and power of sin and into his provisions. Do you need provisions today? God has too much provisions for you. He's got more than enough provisions for you, and he's much more willing now that you've been reconciled to him. He's even much more now willing to share his provisions with you. Scrolling down to Strong's Exhaustive Concordance again. This is good. Heal. Be made whole. Do you need healing today? Because God has too much healing for you. He's got more healing than you could ever need for all of you, for your mental health, for your emotional health, for your physical health. He's got too much for you now that you've been reconciled to him. It says from a primary, let's skip over here to the definition. To save, deliver, or protect. Do you need to be saved? Do you need to be delivered? Do you need to be protected? Are you actually in a safe place, or you're feeling like you're doing great, but you fear that you're not protected, that something might come in and get you, right? If you need protection, God has too much protection for you. He's got more than you could ever need. Much more than now that you've been reconciled by the blood of his son. Heal, preserve, save, do well, it says be whole or make whole. He has made you whole in your soul. He's made you a new creation. And in you there's rivers of living water. He's got all kinds of abundance for you because of what Christ did on the cross. So let's read these verses one more time through the understanding that he has an abundance of good things for you, especially now that you've been reconciled to him through the blood of his son. Okay, for while we were still helpless, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for a good man someone would dare even to die. But God demonstrates his own love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than, having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Let me encourage you to share this episode with the people in your life so they can get that nourishment of God's Word. And hey, did you know that Vita Ministry is a 5-minute excerpt taken from my main podcast, Your Daily Meds? You can hear more at yourdailymeds.org.